When I was a child, I was lucky enough to visit Disneyland Paris quite a few times, starting from 2008 when I was 4 years old. At the time, there were many attractions which you can't find in the park nowadays. For example, Animagique, a show I really loved. I still listen to the soundtrack today actually. But today, I want to focus on a lesser known attraction. One might even call it smaller. Yes, okay, we're talking about World Chorus. In 1992, Disneyland Paris opened. Though it wasn't an initial success, it still garnered many sponsors during that time, such as France Telecom. The telecommunications company worked with Disneyland Paris to create a post-show for the famous ride It's a Small World, which had its own version opening with the park. This version of the ride is a departure from the classic Mary Blair style, but still contains the same profound and universal message of human connection and friendship transgressing all borders. Due to this, the telecommunications company and Walt Disney Animation France wanted to keep the theme consistent, while still creating an intricate advertisement for the company. They came up with a post-show to the ride in what is known as the Octagon, or even the Snail by the cast members. I found that piece of information once on a forum which I can't find anymore. I recall it was written in French and I had to translate it. The phrase "the snail" stuck in my mind though. The post-show carried the central theme of human connection and friendship transgressing all borders by integrating telecommunications, utilizing small animations and cycles which depicted children from all over the world communicating through various technological devices, such as the telephone, fax, machine, email, or Minitel. This brought in various new characters, each with their own designs and short scenarios which would play out in 14 to 15 second loops. Chris Bailey directed the animation, while many artists such as Barry Johnson Esquire were brought on board. Mr. Johnson himself creating storyboards for the attraction's animation, and Mr. Bailey recalled in an interview with Mickey Mouse Park that the project was well defined by the time he was brought on. Olivier Pantouet is also being involved, as seen in his portfolio on Wellhorn Worldwide. A very talented group of thinkers, dreamers, and creatives works to make this technically impressive attraction. And since there is limited information on every single creator who worked to make this possible, I just want to take a moment to thank all the people involved and congratulate them for the success the attraction had during its 19 years of operation. Clearly, the project incorporated all the aspects of It's a Small World which are beloved, with Mr. Bailey stating that modern technology makes communication across the world as simple as calling next door, further showing the extent to which telecommunications was the perfect choice for a ride about unity. When it came to the characters themselves, the room's spiral design acted as a progression of sorts, and included 4 distinct types of animation, with the 4th being added in 2004. Firstly, you had the illumination silhouettes, which were characters in windows triggered by fiber optic shooting stars on the wall. These characters would simply be static, representing different nationalities such as a cowboy looking at a camera for America, once more enforcing the idea of connection through technological advances, though in a static and spontaneous manner. As the people progressed through the room, they'd come across phone boxes known as Small World Small Talk, which would allow them to talk to each other by selecting a child from one of the scenes, which could use CGI to mimic speaking and transmit the message spoken into the microphone, all while staying in character. Then they would see the aforementioned 2D scenes, featuring various characters and using the Pepper's Ghost technique to project the 2-dimensional characters onto a 3-dimensional room. Finally, in the middle there was physical animation through animatronic technology. In the Eiffel Tower sat a small conductor doll to represent the character in concert which seemed to link all the characters together. He was the only physical character in the entire room, and his motion was limited to his arms at the podium he stood upon, which would spin while his arms moved up and down to mimic a conductor's motions, one hand holding a baton. While footage is scarce and oftentimes blurry, it's easy to make out what he's doing and how he's bringing together the room in unity through music and telecommunications. When it comes to World Chorus's characters, I want to preface this section by saying I'm basing a lot of my information off the Disney Wiki versions of them, including their names. However, recent footage findings have proven that some of the depictions of characters are off, such as Conrad and Ken actually playing piano together rather than just communicating. Therefore, I will try and explain each scenario as clearly as possible, and if I get something wrong, I do apologize, but I'm trying my best with the limited footage or even photos I have of each character. Also, I drew these characters based off my perceptions of them from old footage, so some details may be inaccurate, but we can just argue these are my headcanon interpretations and move on. The room's been gone for 13 years, what do you want from me? First of all, you've got Leonardo, a young pilot who is commandeering a yellow and red aeroplane in the clouds with an Italian sticker on it, showing his nationality. I am of the belief that this plane was actually animated in CGI, while the rest of the scene was hand-drawn, but in any case, he sends a message to another little boy called Hans, who plays with his dog, Patches, and the scene then resets. Then you have Moses, a little Egyptian boy who's using the Minitel to communicate with 3 of his friends, a cowgirl, a Japanese kid, and in my art I made him Japanese African and male since pictures of him were blurry, and a German boy. He faxes them some sheet music and they all sing together, Moses pretending to conduct before saying goodbye, and the scene resets once more. Then you've got Alexandra, who's playing with her fish when the phone rings. She answers it to find a gondolier named Alberto on the other end, and with her fish bubbles, the two of them sing together before she bids him goodbye and the scene starts again. Then you have Victoria, who is singing with a recording setup and what looks to be a Minitel in the background. She calls Austria from Britain to see a cat being fed after she checks the time on her watch, so she stops singing for a little while before resuming when the scene resets. Then you've got Abigail and Adrian, who I personally would call twins, but that's just my interpretation of the two. The two British kids went 20,000 leagues under the sea and then Treasure Island for a little bit, before Abigail passes Adrian a grey card which he inserts into the TV, bringing up a video of the conductor as the two sing along to the music. Then you have Miguel, a Spanish guitarist who breaks a string. He then sends a message to Charlotte, who is at a cafe in France, and she receives this message on a pager before dialing Miguel, the two singing together over the phone before Miguel resumes playing guitar. Then you've got Makoto, who is in Japan and transcribing sheet music digitally before he goes to sleep, and his Venezuelan correspondent Diego receives it through email, and he sings a part of it as Makoto wakes up, resetting the scene as he continues transcribing. Now here's one which is a little hazy. The wiki states that an American cowboy, Lucky, calls a dance girl in Brazil called Daphne, but all video evidence of this character has been lost to time. She's only appearing for a few frames in a really blurry way. I did have to assume her appearance while drawing, but in some ways it makes her a bit more special because she's technically an original character with a design inspired by a little girl whose appearance is uncertain. Then you've got a little Italian boy named Lorenzo who seems to run his own theatre and performs a dance for an audience before calling a girl in Sweden named Olivia, who is riding a bike with her dog Spike, the two singing together before he hangs up and the scene resets as he dances once more. Here's another hazy one, as they only have a photo to show this scene, but the wiki argues that an African boy named Han is seen singing with his parrot feathers but makes no mention of the Japanese girl, the Eskimo, and the European boy who seem to appear on a phone call. So I would personally argue that Han called them and sings with the group, though no video evidence exists and all video of the house shows it in its inert state, which it seemed to stay in for many years. Then you have a little Belgian boy named Arthur who is playing a game with an Egyptian boy named Pascal. It seems that the two are making something similar to a poster for the concert, as the conductor is in the center and they are playing with lighting colors, before Pascal's cat seems to press buttons, making Arthur laugh as the scene resets. Then you have Julia and her dog Spot, with Spot seeming to be enthusiastic about one of Julia's posters, depicting the conductor and with the word concert in full view. Julia shows him another poster on the monitor screen, before printing off an orange card, which is possibly a ticket, which he takes, the two running out of the room before the scene resets as they reappear. In front of the Eiffel Tower, you can find the most grandiose scene, with 5 kids on a screen named Helen, Christopher, Mark, Priscilla, and Brittany, all of whom are singing in a concert. Meanwhile, on the other side of the screen, you have the conductor and 3 violinists, the conductor using video communication to conduct them from afar. Finally, you have Conrad playing on a grand piano, which is linked up to a screen recording his notes, with Ken being able to respond on his keyboard as the notes appear, while bluebirds symbolically show the transmission of the music from one pianist to another. Conrad then seems to yawn, and the scene resets as he turns on his computer and begins communicating once more with Ken. As I said, it may not be perfect, but I tried my best with both my art and my explanations to show the characters and their interactions with each other, all tying into that central theme of human connection and friendship transgressing all borders, especially with the help of telecommunications. That word is unnecessarily long. Throughout the years, the post-show didn't change all that much, minus the occasional shut-off of effects, such as the silhouettes not appearing when the stars hit or Han's screen not working. As time passed, things like the conductor spinning became static and obsolete, and only exist in memories, and the technology presented in the videos was forgotten or replaced by newer means of communication. Alternatively, some backgrounds would not work or screens wouldn't play on certain days, but for the most part, time deterioration was all the room suffered. As time and communication moved on, so did the world, leaving this little relic of the past. In some ways, it mirrors the constant backwards feeling you get in an environment like Tomorrowland, where it may feel a bit outdated despite being known as the city of the future. However, all was not lost for the Little Post Show, for as I mentioned earlier, the 4th instance of animation was brought in 2004, with the Small World Small Talk feature. This feature focused on humans communicating with each other, as shown in the only clip I found demonstrating it. It allowed children to choose one of the children characters throughout the room. In this case, the children chose Lucky and Julia, and the children were able to talk to each other even despite the distance, further showing the idea of human connection and friendship through telecommunications. As is evident today, this attraction no longer exists, and that seems to be for three primary reasons. Number 1. France Telecom stopped sponsoring the attraction in 2009, moving on as a company to become Orange, but still retaining a link to Disneyland Paris. Even today, the company still supports attractions, such as the Studio Tram Tour, and telecommunications in the park, but without the evident sponsorship in It's a Small World. Number 2. As I mentioned previously, the technology of the attraction became obsolete quickly, due to the nature of technological advancements. Things like the Minitel or the pager became a thing of the past, people instead having mobile phones and computers which made connections easier. I did read a comment online from Damien Douani, which when translated to English reads, I worked at the time in the innovation laboratory of France Telecom on what was to be the version 2 of the post-show, which had become a bit dusty due to the cases shown, such as fax, fixed telephone, etc. I'd worked with Disney Imagineers on a principle of magic mirrors that allowed people to talk to each other from a distance in the room, as if the magic of telecoms erased distances by transforming themselves into a doll from It's a Small World. Unfortunately, the prohibitive cost of the renovation and development required, Disney's teams don't do any favors and it's very expensive, got the better of this project, and this post-show was left untouched until the end of sponsorship in 2009. He then goes on to briefly speak about the Studio Tram Tour and Orange switching to sponsor it, as previously mentioned. As we can see, the technology was fading quickly, and though the innovation group at France Telecom tried to create an alternative, it too was seen as pointless and the sponsorship was instead dropped. Third and final reason, Princess Pavilion. Many sources say that the reason World Chorus was converted into Princess Pavilion was because of a lack of an indoor meet and greet for princesses, and since there is a large amount of weather diversity in France, such as rain or snow, it's necessary to have these spaces for times when it's not always sunny. Because of the size of the room, it seemed perfect for a meet and greet space, with the spiral design choice being kept for the queue, but all of the remnants of the post-show taken away. And speaking of remnants of the post-show, I found a comment from L. Alex, which reads, Alors, désolé de le dire, mais étant cast member, je ne pense à 90% sûr qu'il ne reste plus rien même en backstage. Or in English, so sorry to say, but being a cast member, I'm 90% sure there's nothing left, even backstage. Personally, this is really sad to me, because I feel awful thinking about how the conductor doll and the characters might all have just been thrown out after not being useful anymore, rather than being preserved after they brightened so many people's days up. Alright, so this is a more personal segment, but imagine you're me for a moment, okay? You're spending your first day in Disneyland Paris ever as a 4-year-old, and you've just gone off It's a Small World with your parents, which was a fun and interesting ride full of beautiful dolls and characters. You walk into a large passage with your parents and are held up to the windows, since you're very small for a 4-year-old. You see Moses before running around and finding windows on your level, such as one which doesn't work but depicts an African rainforest. You keep going until you're in the center and see a conductor, literally pressing against the railing to try and see before being held up to him. You feel excited and amazed at this room, and it becomes somewhere you visit for every consecutive visit until you are 6 years old. Then you are greeted with a strange new room, with banners showing princess emblems. Frantic and in denial, you try and run off, looking at huge mushrooms in hopes that they will have a door leading to the special room, but it's gone, and you start crying. Over a few more visits to Disneyland Paris and Walt Disney World, whenever you ride It's a Small World, you keep looking up at the Eiffel Tower, expecting to see a conductor inside, or seeing the Sphinx and hoping to see a red little Egyptian boy. But there is nothing, and slowly you become confused and forget. Years later, in 2020, you are planning to write a story themed around Disney, and since it's quarantine, you have time. One day, you're searching for photos of Disneyland Paris' Small World as it will be a part of the story, before you see an orange Eiffel Tower, the memories suddenly sparking inside of you. You begin researching this room, finding out information, and over 2 years you learn and remember more than ever, before finally working up the courage to do a full drawing for the room, and then some smaller drawings of each group of characters. Thanks to your courage, you've managed to bring the conductor and his home to light through your drawings, and you've developed a small following. You seem one of the only people in the world who still cares about this place, but that makes it even more special. Finally, in 2020, you gave the conductor a name, Jules. Thanks to various amazing people, I'm happy to say that Jules has received some more relevance these days, due to art trades or teaching my friends about him and his family. I also received the only piece of World Chorus merchandise apart from the Euro Disney France Telecom pin, which specifically doesn't depict World Chorus. But it's a telecart which shows some of the buildings from the room, and as an 18th birthday present, my best friend made me a Jules plushie, which I took on my first ever Disneyland California trip back in October last year. I still love World Chorus, and thanks to it, I've been lucky enough to find some incredible people online who I will always treasure as friends. Whilst I'm not sure what will happen in the future, I know for sure that I want to be a Disneyland Paris cast member. I want to try and find out some information of what I've become of this place. Seeing Jules again would be pretty amazing after all, but I want to ask for some help too. If anyone has any footage or photos of this place, it would be incredible to see. Or if there were any developers or previous cast members who know some information, I would love to hear it. But if not, there's absolutely no problem. Thank you for watching my first ever YouTube video. I really want to make more of these since it seems really fun. But for now, I'll see you all soon. Bye! The what the fuck? the French. The post show carried the central theme. Nicole Austria from Britain to see a cat being fed after she texted. Bro, you're in 1992. It's 2000 late. I can't do math.